All right, let's get into it. We're talking about the first huge experiment in global governance, an organization that was literally born from the wreckage of World War I, with this incredible, almost unbelievable ambition to end all wars forever.
I mean, that was the big question, right? After the absolute devastation of the Great War, everyone was desperate for an answer. And the one they came up with was audacious, it was idealistic, and yeah, it would absolutely change the course of the 20th century, just not, in the way anyone actually expected.
So their response was this revolutionary concept, a mix of pure idealism and, frankly, desperation. It was called the League of Nations. Think of it as this grand utopian plan built on one simple, powerful idea. Let's make sure this never happens again.
The whole thing was championed by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. It was a key part of his famous 14 points. The idea was to create a permanent place where countries could talk out their problems instead of fighting. And get this, its charter, the covenant, was actually woven right into the Treaty of Versailles, which officially kicked the whole thing off in 1920.
Now, this is the really interesting part. The whole thing was built on this powerful, almost radical idea called collective security. The theory was pretty simple. If you attack one of us, you attack all of us. The entire global community would team up to protect any member from an aggressor. It was a promise of all for one and one for all on a global scale.
So its founding document, the Covenant, laid out this incredibly hopeful blueprint for a world without war. It was all about preserving borders, getting countries to work together, and, this is a big one, achieving global disarmament. That last part would become a huge part of its mission, and honestly, one of its biggest challenges.
But here's something you might not know. While the big, flashy goal was world peace, some of the League's most lasting achievements were actually happening behind the scenes in the day-to-day work of its specialized agencies.
These agencies were staffed by true idealists, a new kind of international civil servant who genuinely believed they could build a better world. And you know what? They made real, tangible progress on social and humanitarian issues that still affect us today.
And this is a fantastic example of their impact on everyday life. The ILO, which was an agency of the League, successfully pushed to standardize the 48-hour work week with a max of 8 hours a day. For workers' rights around the world, this was a massive, massive step forward.
And their work was incredibly far-reaching. The League's commissions took on everything from the global opium trade to human trafficking. Its health committee set international standards for things like nutrition and hygiene, and its social section fought to abolish the slave trade. I mean, this was groundbreaking stuff for its time.
Okay, so despite all those real successes, the League's political structure was, well, it was in trouble. It was plagued by these deep, fundamental weaknesses right from the start. That beautiful utopian vision was on a collision course with the cold, hard reality of power politics.
This chart really gets to the heart of the problem. On one hand, you have the promise of collective action, but in reality, the League had no army of its own. It was supposed to be a global club, but some of the biggest players, especially the United States, never even showed up. And it promised swift action, but any key member could just veto a decision, leading to total gridlock.
The fact that the United States never joined was a critical blow, maybe even a fatal one. So why didn't they? Well, a powerful wave of isolationism just swept the country. Americans were tired of war and did not want to get entangled in Europe's messy politics again. This was all fired up by fierce political opposition at home, led by Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, who argued the League would steal American sovereignty.
The political thinker E.A. Card just summed up the whole critique perfectly. He basically said the League was a beautiful fantasy that completely ignored how the world really works, which is all about national self-interest and raw power. He argued it was this elegant idea with no real foundation to stand on. And these weren't just theoretical problems. Oh no. These structural flaws were brutally exposed when the League faced its first major tests from aggressive expansionist countries in the 1920s and 30s.
The Corfu incident in 1923 was a really bad sign. So Mussolini's Italy invades a Greek island. The League steps in and condemns him, but Mussolini, a big player in Europe, just completely ignores them. He goes around the League to a different group of diplomats, and in the end, the League was totally sidelined and the aggressor actually got rewarded. But the real test, the one that broke the camel's back, was in 1931 when Japan invaded Manchuria. The League's response was just painfully slow. It took them a year and a half to investigate and finally publish a report condemning Japan. And Japan's response to being condemned?
They just walked right out of the League. No consequences. At all.
So here's the crucial point. This failure was basically a green light for other aggressors. You better believe Hitler and Mussolini were watching this all go down. And the lesson they learned was simple. The League of Nations was a paper tiger. It could roar all it wanted, but it had no teeth.
So yeah, it failed in its main mission to prevent another world war, but the League's collapse wasn't a total waste. In fact, it provided the essential, hard-won lessons that would eventually shape its successor.
When the architects of the United Nations got together after World War II, they looked right at the League's mistakes and addressed them one by one. The UN made sure all the major powers, especially the US, were in from the start. It gave its Security Council the power to use military force, and its charter was a totally separate document, free from the baggage of a controversial peace treaty.
And that brings us right back to E.H. Carr's brilliant critique. His point was, you can't build a palace on sand. The League was a noble idea, an elegant structure for sure, but it was built on the shaky ground of a world that just wasn't ready for it yet, a world still run by nationalism and raw power.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. The League of Nations failed because it was an idea ahead of its time. So when you look at the world today, with all of our own tensions and conflicts, you have to ask, has the climate for true international cooperation finally arrived, or are we still just digging the foundations?